If you've ever heard that cliche, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to see it, who knows? Well, Clive is one of those guys where if he doesn't tell his story, you've missed out, because it's hard to believe that it's true, but it absolutely is. So please welcome Clive. Come on up. Clive, I really wanted you to share a little bit with the audience about how you even began to lead the life that you live, because it's really exceptional. And I think you had exceptional parents.
Well, one doesn't realise that, of course, you're born into it, but my parents, they were by no means privileged, but they had this quest for adventure and a sense of wonder that took them into Eastern Africa when we were just kids, and they took us around as they filmed wildlife in, as you see, the home was a camper van, and sometimes it was a boat that my father built, and they were passionate about cinematography, not for cinematography itself, but because they believed that what they were seeing was something really special and that may not always be there. But like any cinematography, you want to show other people what it's like. So they started filming wildlife, and of course, coming to New Zealand after that was a fairly safe place compared to Eastern Africa with the wild animals, and they started filming us, which we became the wild animals, I guess.
Well, you had a very outdoors life, you and your brothers. And at what age did you pick up a camera yourself?
The age of 15. My parents wouldn't let me touch their camera, so I basically went to a pawn shop and grabbed what I could and repaired it and started filming.
Well, what you're going to see in the movie tonight is a compilation of more than 40 years of footage. And there just are not very many people on the planet, even in this day and age of social media, who have really documented so consistently the phases of their friends' lives, and you've captured that here. You seem to have found, in a very small, unpopulated place, some pretty incredible people. How were those friends found?
Those kids that took to the wilderness, and it was usually because their mothers allowed them to, I suppose, they soon met and then started inventing these various pursuits that they could do to take advantage of the extraordinary place that New Zealand is, with the waterfalls, lakes, ocean, and fantastic amenities there for adventure that weren't exploited. It was literally untouched. There was no one around.
Well, I was fortunate to see a screener of your film, and I watched it with my 3 boys, 3 very different ages, and they were captivated. And
Great.
while they do lead an outdoors life, we did talk a little bit about how that has changed, and socially, what have been the ramifications of children's lives and means of playing changing?
Well, I think back then kids were free to play in the outdoors, and of course that was because they were quite well controlled inside, and the comfort zone or the escape zone was the great outdoors. And it was there that the kids invented their toys, invented ways of using that energy, that raw energy that nature provided, to be able to pursue what was to become the pioneering of extreme sports.
Does it seem ironic to you now? We've got a real culture of extreme sports and, outdoor, $1 million events that go on around the world. Yet when I watch just the purity of you folks discovering these sports and even inventing equipment to go with them, it was just such an original pursuit. Does it strike you now as amazing? I mean, you're still active.
Sure, there's the commercial side of it, but there's the lifestyle that was pioneered as well. It wasn't just pioneering equipment and sports. It was the search for some kind of utopia, some kind of paradise. And that was also in the way you lived, and I guess to go outside the mold and find something new. And it was that childhood dream that led this group of people to go forward and search for another way of living, and a way that would embrace their passions as well and to create careers out of that. I think that's what led to what we have today.
And your discovery of surfing is obviously something that's affected your life and the lives of your friends. But what was it like discovering, you talk a little bit about it in the film, but coming over that hill in New Zealand and just seeing incredible waves and realising that there's no one out and it's all yours if you can work out how to do it?
The vision came from America, just newspaper clippings and so on, with this vision of what surfing might be, so we didn't know what surfing was. And to emulate surfing on whatever we could, the mud or whatever, at Raglan, not realise that over the hill was this world-class break. It was just fantastic. But I think what surfing had a significance in this journey and in this film, in that it was probably where the maverick spirit of fun was born. And to this day, the people that were involved in surfing are the ones that I suppose want to fill their life up with fun. They're sort of the progenitors of fun. And it was that search and that quest for fun as well as adventure that led to all these other sports. So I look on surfing as being the kingpin, as being the initiator of what was to be a journey to come.
Is it relative? I mean, for those discovering surfing and windsurfing and these sports today, these real sort of environmentally based sports, is it relative that, you know, we come to it with crowds and a really different playing field now? Do you think we still enjoy the same stoke or get the same rush and enjoyment out of it as you did when you got to see these uncrowded breaks?
Well, I would hope so, but of course now because it's so commercialised and so many people are doing it, there's a certain essence of it which is difficult to get. But through the film, I try and encourage people to be pioneers in their own life and maybe invent for themselves another way of doing it or their own journey and something born out of their personal childhood dream so that it becomes a personal fulfillment. And there are many more sports and lifestyles to discover out there. And this film's about, I guess, resurrecting the spirit of innovation. And so to empower people with that private spirit of innovation gives them a way of finding their own answers to problems as well as designing their own lifestyle.
Which is exactly what you did. You are a physicist by trade, actually. And although you and your friends sort of invented and created a lot of equipment, perhaps one of your greatest contributions is the science behind forecasting the exact time when a great swell will come. Can you tell us a little bit more about the necessity being the mother of invention of something that today is part of all surfers and ocean athletes' lives?
Yes, that's right. I mean, a lot of this innovation came out of necessity, all the way back to Rutherford, of course. And growing up on an island that was isolated, where we didn't have products on the shelf, we had to invent everything. But the real necessity was that, once again, that burning passion to catch the best surf in the world when no one else was there in the midst of the 1973 energy crisis. And it gives us a reflection on what could happen again. You know, the world ran out of gasoline due to politics in the Middle East. And so here was this, I suppose, comical scenario where surfers realized that if they could use their gas rations to get to the surf on the right day, it would be uncrowded. And that led to a tremendous drive to be able to predict the surf. But that didn't come out of any knowledge or records in academia or university libraries. It had to be invented, if you like, as well. And so that was done by using the analogy of water waves and light waves that come from the sun, as you'll see in the movie. And that's, I think that the birth of digital electronics in the early 70s enabled us to do that, as we were able to design new machines to verify the theoretical mathematics and so predict the surf within a few hours. And that was a fantastic asset. Once again, it was born of the appetite for fun and want to get there.
So you came up with that technology and, in fact, handed it along to oil rigs and governments and different people who had a stake in things on the ocean.
My career became digital electronics and physics. So you couldn't sell this to the surf industry. It didn't exist then. But there was a huge demand for oil companies to be able to safely prospect for oil and engage oil rigs in seas that were unpredictable. So you can see there's a market straight away. So for 10 years I was doing that. So what came out of surfing went into the oil industry and eventually came back into the surf industry as the standard models were built for surf prediction.
Is it almost an irony as well that the technology was used to source fossil fuel, oils and energy that now, you know, essentially it's the ocean again, as we'll learn through your film, that holds all of that potential to basically free us of that again?
Well, an irony? I don't know. Remember that the pursuit of oil and fossil fuels is in accordance to demand. But If that had gone ahead without the technology, then there would have been a lot of oil disasters. The new technology that we were developing for oil exploration was to do it safely and without damage to the environment. And what was achieved was quite amazing in terms of where they can drill these days. But always, disaster has to be averted by using clever technology. And so it was really the safety and environmental concern which propelled the need for digital electronic machines.
Well, how fabulous it could come back to forecasting awesome waves for us. It's really important here in Hawaii for that reason alone as well. Can you just tell us a little bit about the nature of your friends who invented things that I guess preceded tow-in surfboards, the bungee jumping, foam sandwich core construction, epoxy for surfboards. I mean, some, again, fantastic designs that almost seem unrealistic that just such a handful of people could have come up with this stuff.
Yes. I think that once again it's necessity is the mother of invention, and when it comes down to finding a career when you've chosen to live in a ridiculous place like the coastline away from the city, then you've got to find some other way of earning money. And for these people whose passion was the ocean and extreme sports, it so turned out that they were able to, or they were driven to, use that as a career or develop that into a career. And of course it went beyond a career, it became a worldwide phenomenon in many cases.
Well, by virtue of you investing more than 40 years into filming the lives that you leaded with your friends, we see an incredible time capsule of what actually is going on with Earth in this movie as well. We see the glaciers that you guys climbed and explored and hang glided over and skied down in jeans, I noticed, pre-Patagonia era. But we really see what happens to those mountains over time. Was that something that inadvertently happened, or were you aware at some point along the line that you were seeing this unfold?
There was a slight awareness. There were a few individuals I'd met who were pointing to what might happen. And so there was a focus in what was filmed. I'm often asked, why is it that so much of the footage you have actually relates to the story? And that's because what was focused on by myself and other filmers in this sense was really influenced by what we saw as being valuable, what might change, and what the future might be. So there was almost a plot, a film script in mind when I began it. By the age of 17, I saw that film script. And that's what I was focusing on. So you can see, I mean, waves will always be there. Well, not all of them, but some of them have gone. But the culture and the things that were about to change, that was the things I was focusing on. And that's why you'll see that.
That's incredible foresight. I mean, it seems so clear and so stark when you watch something and look back at it, but to have the foresight for that is so incredible.
I think it was a preoccupation rather than the foresight. It was a really strong concern of mine back in the 70s. And I think maybe it's overlooked that there was such an environmental consciousness and movement in the 70s that actually gave rise to people starting to look at things differently back then. And it seems that the 30 or 40 years in between has gone by without us actually making a lot of changes in that respect.
Well, speaking of change, you have travelled a lot. We see some of those travels in the movie. But you did come through the North Shore for the first time in the early 70s, and you've travelled to many coastlines around the world multiple times since then. Have the coastlines changed everywhere around the world, and how have we changed here?
Yes, they have definitely changed, and they've changed in the terms of the natural wilderness, and they've also changed in terms of development, of course. It's almost inevitable. In terms of Hawaii, I was pleasantly surprised when I came back here, and I haven't been here for 3 decades, I think, to the North Shore, and I got halfway down the North Shore and didn't recognize that I was actually here. And I think that's because there seems to have been some kind of restraint on development here. It almost seemed like it was less developed than when I was here, but that's because the countries I live in have so much accelerated in terms of the development, and not necessarily the right development, that when I came here it was a breath of fresh air. Sure, they have developed, but it wasn't obvious that was the case. And one of the things that's really prevented it from looking like it's developed is the insistence upon trees and nature in amongst the architecture. And that's the same in Raglan, in fact. There's probably 20 times as many houses there, but you don't see them because, and I'd have to take my hat off to surfers, because they sort of pioneered this method of development in a way to insist that nature always took the front row.
Right.
And that anything that was to be changed was changed in the background of nature. That it wasn't your architecture or your bold house that dominated. It was the trees that dominated. And amongst that was this predominance of what I see as being that childhood Robinson Crusoe dream. That it's all about living in the tree hut and living in nature, and the same as the Kalalau Valley in Kauai. You know, that whole concept has been perpetuated here in Oahu, in the North Shore. That's unique to anywhere else in the island, as far as I see it. And long may it continue, and because the pressure will be on to change that.
Thanks for that. When you look back now, I mean, obviously we can't go back all the way, but you show some of the technology now. It's introduced in here with the tokamak and using basically heat to convert salt water to energy, which we'll learn about a bit in the film. Where is that at now? Because you were saying that that has kind of gained steam again, that the urgency is there and it's going forward. So once we've seen the film tonight, can you just fill us in right now to let us know where that energy, extra, natural energy source is at? Okay.
This journey of innovation goes all the way through to the biggest project in the history of mankind, which is the ITER project. And 60% of the world's population is involved in it. And it currently is the biggest promise to reduce the dependency on fossil fuels for mainstream baseload electrical power. And that's something that very few people know about, and that's why I gave it particular airtime on this movie. But because it was also rooted in that same drive for innovation and problem solving that came out of the journey in the film. It's now under construction in Cadarache, which is just above Marseille in France, and it's probably going to be a good 8 years before it's completed, but a great start has been made and it's on track.
It's wonderful. Well, you're going to be taking your time traveling throughout countries throughout the world in the next year or two to show this film. You have had some staggered showings here and there. When you meet people and get the opportunity to show them the movie, what is the most astounding thing for you that seems to come out of it from other people? What do you find from those who get to see it?
Well, I think that they're surprised to realize how the world was perhaps 4 or 5 decades ago, where the animals ruled the world, and how much change there's been. Most of the population has not personally experienced parts of the world which have changed so radically. So with each generation, of course, we lose sight of what this planet used to be like. And in the film, I like to show in reality through original footage how that was, and I think that's what people come out with, is a picture of how it was, how much change there's been, and inspired about how we can actually address the issues that lie ahead.
So what's the trick? Is it getting more people to get outside and enjoy the outdoors, to want to embrace it and preserve it? Or what's the best way to go about getting people energized about being passionate about the environment and being able to live in it and play in it like we have? Well,
actually, personally, I think watch the movie. The more people that see Last Paradise, the more that will be able to appreciate the picture of where we've been, where we're going, and what the solutions are. But I think there's a very strong and insidious link between where children play and the welfare of the wilderness in the future, and our chances of addressing the really big problems that we face. And you'll see that link very clearly in this film.
It is an astounding film, so please tell us where trailers can be found and where we can find out where the film will play.
Thank you. Well, Last Paradise trailer can be found on a website, which is lastparadisefilm.com, and there you'll also be able to see where the future screenings will be coming, both in festivals and in the USA and Australia. I think Australia's next year and possibly the USA next year, and then Europe. So it may take 2 or 3 years to actually get the movie out there. Independent movies are like that. They have to kind of grow. We don't have the publicity budget, but if we can get a couple of good sponsors behind us, I sure hope we can take the film right round the USA and round Europe.
Well, Clive, it is really a privilege to meet you. Your film blew me away. All the best.
Thank you.